Welcome back to the Cempaka Connect New Product Convention. Without further ado, we will now invite the next company, Zikry's Secret.
Good morning to everyone present in the hall. Okay, my name is Zikry and I'm the CEO of my company, and without further ado, I shall let my employees further elaborate.
Very good morning, everyone. Our project is stomach chips will monitor our diet, your diet, as you can see on the top. So I'm going to explain how it works. Everyone pay attention. First off, we are going to implant a microchip into the stomach. How do we do this? We do this with a pill. The microchip will be embedded in a pill, and the pill is harmless. Don't worry. When the pill enters our mouth, it will dissolve. When it reaches the stomach, the microchip will stick onto the stomach wall. I'll explain how it sticks. It's through this technology that Professor Chris Tomazo has done research on. It's actually a technology using pathogens fluid. This pathogen is called H. pylori, yellow factor pylori. This pathogen secretes anthocyanins, which will bind to lipids and carbohydrates on our stomach wall, so that if we use this technology on the microchip, it won't move around. When there's food, the microchip won't float around and it won't go to our intestines and we won't defecate it out. Next, there will be a titanium pacemaker in the microchip. The technology is similar to our SA node in our heart, which functions to send impulses to our nervous system so that our ventricles can pump heart to all parts of the body. It's the same technology. This pacemaker lasts for 5 years, so most people who uses our product has to change every 5 years. Well, this product has two functions. First off, it can sense food intake. When people eat food, there will be a sensor on the microchip, which is advanced technology, and it will basically transmit signals back into a small device, our partner device, which is, we can also use our phone, if technology allows us to monitor our diet. Also, this chip functions to stop us from feeling hungry. When we are, let's say, 60% full, the chip will send impulses to our nervous system, and our vagus nerve, which is the largest nerve on our body, will combine all the impulses and send it back to our brain. To be more specific, it's the hypothalamus, which controls any type of diet. And this chip, let's say we are 60% full, the chip will tell our brain that we are actually 100% full. So we don't eat too much and we don't grow fat.
Okay, how it changes our lives. Okay, firstly, it helps us reduce the number of obese people, as the main idea of the project is to help people with weight problems lose weight, aka obese people. Secondly, it helps prevent excessive eating disorder, as the microchip helps control our appetite, as you said, where the microchip, through our vagus nerve, sends impulses to our hypothalamus in our brain to control our appetite. And thirdly, a stepping stone for people to start exercising. For example, let's say an obese people who can't even stand on their feet. Let's say if our product has produced adequate results, produce very good results. So in just a matter of time, people could lose how many pounds, maybe 10 pounds, I don't know. So they can start working out, exercise.
So our target market. Our target market is the individuals who find it hard, difficult to control their diet. For example, obese individuals, anorexic individuals, and also senior citizens. These obese individuals, they experience what we call as binge eating disorder, which cause them to eat their appetite to control or affected by the emotion. For example, when they are sad, they eat. When they are happy, they eat. And also, when they are bored, they also eat. Such that, as for the senior citizen, as they grow older, their appetite is suppressed and cause them to eat less. And by the presence of this stomach chip, can help all these individuals to achieve a perfect range of BMI between 18.5 to 24.9 in order to achieve a healthy lifestyle. Next slide, please. So, how we are going to raise funds for our project? So, we decided to use online, internet, as Kickstarter.com, which is the largest fundraising website, which allows people all around the world to invest in the project and be part of the project. Thank you.
Okay, kicking off with two questions. First one, okay, you mentioned that once the chip is actually in the stomach, it sticks on to the stomach, right? And you have a finite life of 5 years for one of the devices inside the chip, right? How do you remove it after it has, well, assuming it's malfunctioning or that it's expired? How do you remove it?
The pathogen actually secretes the antacid, which is the fluid we use in this technology. It will last for 5 years, it will degenerate, and then we will just defecate it out.
So you mean that the 5 years that you're talking about is how long the sticky factor would last, and then automatically it will lose its stickiness and what happens if, let's say, it's not functioning properly and you want to replace it or remove it?
You can also secrete another fluid which removes antacid from stickiness on the wall in the chip.
So you would inject that,
Yes.
or you would swallow that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Second question, in terms of what you mentioned, right? Okay, it's quite an interesting thing that I wanted to ask you. From where you're coming from in terms of the direction, right? You mentioned that the chip, essentially how it works is that it will send signals to your brain, okay? That tells you that you are full at 100% capacity, right? Now, this entirely presumes that your brain is 100% the control for whether you eat or do not eat. Is that where you're coming from?
Yes.
Okay, and you have something that you are basing this on, that you can share that it is the brain that is 100% responsible for whether we eat or we do not eat.
Actually, research done by Imperial College in London.
Okay, so you have that in terms of the family. All right, good.
You said that you wanted to raise funds online by people donating. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit why you chose to go that way?
In terms of online, as I think everyone knows about the phone block website where they try to get a lot of votes from the public on creating this phone block thingy. So basically what Alif is trying to say is we can do something like that. So basically we just explain how our microchip works and like give them proof, like all our research, to actually make everyone convinced that this actually could work. It could help us. So it's just a vote from the public.
Okay, technically, I thought it's quite brilliant, all right? It's simple. I think you have a very strong grasp of what you're talking about in terms of the first slide alone. All right, I think it was really well done. It's very clear to me what this chip is, how it gets introduced to the body. I mean, it's really well explained. All right. I think on the whole, this is short and sweet. It's very crisp. The only thing I would say that you would do better is it's such a commercially profitable venture here that we're talking about that the funding through Kickstarter maybe doesn't justify the potential of what it has. That's all I'm saying. And I think if you've really got the science worked out here, right? You know exactly how it works, right? You would do yourself more justice by getting better sources of funding, really, right? Because there will be many people that will be willing to fund this at the level that you have described. So I think it was a really good job. Thanks. Thank you, everybody. I hope one of you will agree in this.
Thank you. The next group will be Paragon from Junior 1.
Good morning, everyone. We are from Paragon, and our prediction is that brain interfaces will help you fully inhabit the virtual world. So, the human brain has millions of capabilities. But do you ever think of linking your brain impulses directly to a virtual world? So, imagine the potential to manipulate machinery and computers with nothing more than just a thought. You don't need to use a keyboard, a mouse, and things, just your thoughts. So a virtual world is basically a computer simulated world. The user has the ability to manipulate the elements within this model world and also feel like they're actually in this world. So it allows a form of telepresence. So in order to link brain interfaces to a virtual world, you need the interface. So we have the brain-computer interface, which allows direct communication between the human brain and external devices. So the brain-computer interface is usually used to augment, assist, or repair human cognitive functions and sensory motor systems. So how do these work? Okay, your brain is actually filled with neurons, and every time you think something, brain impulses zap from neuron to neuron, and actually some of these electrical signals escape. And scientists have the ability to read these signals and interpret them and use them to direct the device. And in order to do so, there's this device called the EEG, which is a set of electrodes that's implanted onto the user's head, and the electrical signals can be read. As you can see in the picture, there's an implanted electrode, and the patient mentally visualizes the cursor, and the brain activity is interpreted by the software, and the cursor moves to the target.
Okay, so basically, this is a video, and it's an example where PCIs and virtual world technology can work together. So basically, what this system does is it identifies the patterns of activity in the brain. And when a patient thinks about moving his limbs, for example, the signals will then be utilized to make the on-screen character move.
The system will be beneficial for severely disabled people, and it is hoped that the brain sensing technology is able to help them to operate devices remotely. With the BCI system, the vision of connecting virtual world to the human brain is brought one step closer. This is able to help increase the prospect of disabled individuals to participate in workplace and interactions.
Okay, so this is a case study called Essentia, And basically, two teams from two different universities, they formed an association called Pressentia. And what this system is it can help disabled and paralyzed people. So basically, the patients will be asked to sit on a chair, as shown in the video before, and then stereo video footage will be presented on the walls. And basically, the patients will be asked to walk and will be asked to interact with the virtual characters. So basically, Dr. Friedman, a member of the team, stated that the patient enjoyed this experience as he felt as if he could walk again.
And also another example is that people in wheelchairs, they can just steer the wheelchairs with just their thoughts. They don't actually have to use their hands to push the wheels, but just think of moving and they'll move. So who will buy this discovery? So our target market has two main sectors, basically the professional and medical sector and the leisure and entertainment sector. So for the professional medical sector, we could appeal to hospitals and rehabilitation centers to carry out processes like what he mentioned earlier. And also for the leisure sector, this could apply for video game companies, because this whole idea of gaming in the virtual world without actually having to use a remote or a keyboard can actually revolutionize the whole video game industry. Imagine playing Sims but just with your thoughts. You don't actually have to use your mouse to control the person. We'll definitely need a lot of funding because this is a technology-based project, so it requires a lot of research, development, and ultimately we need to test the system a lot because the main priority for the system is effectiveness.
And we get our fundings from National Health Institutes and National Science Institutes and Defense Institutes and also video game companies. So there are already a few funded by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, and also the National Science.
Thank you.
So, quick question on the product itself, right? The science or the technology, right, that you are planning to produce, all right? It's basically how does it work for, let's say, the disabled? Is it something that they, like you said, they wear on as a headgear, and it enables them to do what? Can you just run that?
Basically, they can use it for rehabilitation purposes. So it allows them to feel as if they're walking again. So.
All right.
Yeah.
So okay, there are several aspects that you mentioned, because you mentioned 3 different target markets, right? So one would be helping people on a wheelchair to move, all right? And if I understand it correctly, then they're using just their thoughts to basically move the wheelchair, is that right? No control, no gadget. The rehab one, I'm curious, what exactly does it do? Let's say you have someone who is unable to walk, but through this virtual thing, you're allowing the person to imagine they're walking. How does that rehabilitate? I'm just curious.
So basically, obviously, if someone loses a limb, they may become traumatized or something like that, right? So if they can experience walking again, then it will basically it helps disabled people interact socially as well. I think Nigel made a point before about it, where you can help disabled people to socialize.
Okay, I'm just trying to imagine how it helps the socialization. So let's say now I lost some limbs. Obviously I can't walk anymore, right? without the use of any aids, right? So I have this virtual device which I buy from you, and I can imagine myself now in a virtual world walking. But how does that help me socialize? It is a virtual socialization which is no different from an avatar, isn't it? Does it help me to socialize with a person that's next to me that has got limbs? Yeah, I'm just trying to understand it better. Where does the socialization take place?
Basically, when they wear the EEG on their head, they'll be able to feel like they're actually there because the EEG picks up the brain activity. So it's different from just using an avatar in an online world because you feel like you are actually there and allows you to interact with like the virtual world around you. So it's not just like a computer game because you actually will feel like you're there. And you can actually walk around.
Right. So your socialization, I'm just trying to understand where your socialization takes place. It's in the virtual world, not in the real world. Alright? Okay.
Okay, Mason, if this is just mind controlling remote, why would your funding be for the defense institutions?
Because they have used this system in the army as well as the previous group has mentioned, where they can.
Can you give us some example, like exactly where in the army can this system be used?
When they carry out their trainings, it's extremely dangerous to carry out their trainings with live firearms and explosives. So they can use this to simulate a war scenario when they're actually learning how to take the stress while they are fighting. So,
thank you.
Must be crystal clear, the very questions. Okay, I think on the whole, the explanation of the technology, I think it's pretty much there. I think the only thing that maybe I won't say it's missing, but it may not be strong enough is, when you commercialize this, your target market obviously are the hospitals. Okay, the video game industry is a no-brainer. I think that's quite self-explanatory. But the rehab centers and the hospitals, essentially, where's the commercial gain? So I'm just trying to picture it again. We're investing X dollars. You do the research to actually produce and manufacture this device. It's a device, it's an 8-gear device, right? And you're getting the hospitals and the rehab centers to buy it. And then they charge the customers instead. Is that the commercial model? Yeah? And you're not selling it directly to people who are on wheelchairs, for example.
So for now, our target market will be hospitals and also the video game industry. But in the future, when this whole system kind of develops and is more familiarized amongst everyone, then we could bring it to the public. Because for now, it wouldn't be very common for people to actually buy the system as it is.
I think on the overall, what I find about this presentation is that comparing to the one that's done earlier, it's much clearer in terms of what your products are and who you're trying to sell it to. I think even though you've got 3 target markets, but at least you make it very clear, we're doing this, we're going to produce this for this purpose, and I think that's the good thing about it, right? Okay, good, thanks.
Thank you.
Next, we will have Team Alpha from Form 4.
A very good morning to everyone in the hall. My name is Sarah, and my group will be talking about an engine that will enable us to go to Alpha Centauri. So what is Alpha Centauri? Alpha Centauri is one of the biggest stars in the solar system. It is 4.37 light years away, and it has 3 stars. The first two stars is the Century A and Century B, which orbit each other for 80 years. And the third star is Primosa Centauri.
Our part of our Alpha Centauri, how we're going to go is through antimatter. Antimatter is a material compound of antiparticles. It has the same mass as a particle of an ordinary matter but have opposite charges. So small amounts of antimatter have been produced in particle accelerations. On 26th of April 2011, the Alpha collaboration announced that they have trapped 309 anti-hydrogen atoms, some for as long as 1,000 seconds. So all in all, when antimatter reacts with matter, it will produce a very high amount of energy. Thus, we came up with an antimatter engine that works by annihilating matter and antimatter. The annihilation of matter and antimatter will produce a very high amount of energy in the form of mesons and also gamma rays, as its subparticles collide with its respective antiparticles. For example, an electron with a positron. So, 1.5 milligrams of antimatters, when annihilating with matter, it can produce energy which is sufficient for our current space engines and all to travel to Pluto and back within 1 year. So, we will now show you the diagram of the engine that we are suggesting. Yeah, as you can see, these are the various views, how it will look like. Yes. Again, this is the engine. It will be placed at the wings, behind the wings, and behind the engine, behind the thing itself, the machine itself. Okay. In that vacant area, the antimatter reaction area, the antimatters and also matters will be released for annihilation process to occur. So the energy will be produced, and you can see there's a booster there. The booster will actually channel the energy via the channel, so it can be channeled out of the engine. And thus, it will be creating a high pressure to propel the engine. And in the machine itself, since gamma rays, which is emitted, are not actually subject to magnetic fields, mirrors can actually be built inside to actually refract the rays in one direction to actually be channeled out via the magnetic nozzle, which is the channel itself. And also in the machine itself, the antimatters are actually kept in vacuum and in solid state. Because it reacts with matters including air, to actually produce energy, which is very harmful. And also in solid form, because it is easier to handle as compared to other forms.
But why do we need to reach Alpha Centauri? The main reason is that we need to look for a new habitable planet. Stephen Hawking once said that the population of the world will continue to rise, but resources will be limited. This means that eventually a war may be started by humans to gain limited resources. In 2012, a group of European scientists discovered Alpha Centauri b, and a planet which orbits around Alpha Centauri b. Although its hot environment means it's uninhabitable, planets usually form in groups, which means that it's very likely that there are other habitable planets near.
So our target market, within the next 50 to 100 years, astronomers and physicists will work on developing the technology needed for interstellar travel possible. So our funding-wise, we are targeting the national states who respond to crisis and
world regions take the lead, which overpopulation is accompanied by a growth in organized religion. Meanwhile, we have final encounter sites of intelligent life, where else they stay in the universe. The largest regions compete to launch interstellar missionary projects. And lastly, it's trillionaires in the top toys. Average global growth of 5% has led to a doubling of wealth every 15 years, while breakthrough in life extensions to lead people living beyond 150 years. Thank you.
Okay, quick question. What is your product?
Antimatter engine.
Okay, antimatter engine, right? And basically you're asking for funding from those three sources to research and build the antimatter engine, right? Okay.
And why would the funding be on 3 religions? I didn't get that. Go to the slide. Your last slide. Your last slide. Can we see your last slide, please?
In different regions.
And they'll be funding your engine?
So it's directly developed method technology.
Competition between the religious leaders for the engine. The question is, why would the funding be from religious leaders? I don't understand that. Why would they be competing to get the engine?
Well, that's not exactly the main factor. The main funding, in a way, so that's just the right.
I don't understand. Can you explain?
Why we are competing against each other. So, Stephen Hawking once said that.
Stephen Hawking says a lot of things that contradict. Okay? Go ahead.
Right. Yeah. So they'll have like war. They fight against each other. So in order for them to go to another habitat planet, they have to fight for our antimatter engine so that they can do more stuff and discover more stuff on the planet.
You understand how absurd that sounds? That the religious leaders would be trying to fight each other off in another planet,
no,
so they'll be fighting your project.
They fight between each other, like in our country, so that
in our country,
like in Earth,
on Earth.
Yeah.
So they'll buy your engine to go off to another planet. Where are you taking this? Seriously? No, seriously?
Yeah.
You can just say it's just a typo or whatever, because it doesn't make sense what you're saying. And I want to know, are you still insisting on what you're saying? That actually you can get funding from world religions because they're trying to compete with each other to support your engine. It doesn't make sense.
Well, that's what we all concluded from our research.
Your research, which part of your research says that these religions will be fighting off in another planet? Can you quote?
Not now. Yeah, we have proof like Stephen Hawking once said. That's why we
Except Stephen Hawking, do you have any other proof? Because people say many things. Any research, any study. Thank you.
Is it you use hydrogen to let your motor function? Is it how you make the motor function?
How the engine functions?
Yes. What will make your engine function?
How will the engine function?
Is it hydrogen?
It's not hydrogen. It's like basically matter and antimatter. It's something very general. Okay, so basically antimatter is something like matter. It's like green but different characteristics. You see, they have opposite characteristics of matter. So when they react together, they will go through this process, annihilation. After that, they will produce high energy.
this matter, is it easily get from
Okay, so it's basically like electrons, electrons of an atom with the positrons of another antimatter. It's not basically a...
Okay, so that it can generate electric, it can generate energy, right?
Yes.
Then you just sell it to those generate electricity rather than go to star. You get what I mean? Your target market, better sell it to those companies that generate electric. Because now the whole world is looking for the
So, you're suggesting that this annihilation of antimatter matter can be channeled to electricity also?
Yeah, of course, we're looking for alternate to replace the oil. If you
Yes, basically this concept is a very general concept that basically produce energy, and the energy can be used for traveling in space, or you can just use it on Earth.
no need to go to space, I just use for the Earth screen, not very.
Yeah, but the thing is, we are given the topic to do about space. So,
okay.
Just one final comment. The final slide was about the funding. There was also the quote, trillionaires and their toys. Can you just maybe clarify what that means?
I don't understand why you chose them.
Just the term, the toys. I think I know what you mean. For the audience, if you can just clarify that.
Like, I guess, because we found that in 2000 and 2200, the world is 1,000 times wealthier than it is today. So, and has more people. Just as today, hyper wealth people, they have extra money. Why can't they spend on these kind of things? And I know that some of them, they actually spend money to travel to other space, like moon and all. So, yeah.
I mean, they've got so much money that it's just like a toy for them to play and mess about with, kind of. That's what I thought you meant.
It's like a device.
Like you have billionaires who just invest in football clubs just for the fun of it. Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Okay, this is a weird one, especially the last slide on the religious leaders. Okay, I think on the whole, the challenge that you have is knowing what your product actually is, all right? Because remember the first question I asked you is what's your product, and you very confidently said what's the engine, all right? It's the engine, and then what I want you to do is to reflect on the fact that you are saying that your product is the engine that can take you somewhere, that can take you to Alpha Centauri, and then look at your target market, okay? Because then when you flash the target market slide, what you are saying is that billionaires are buying the engine, not the trip. So you need to be clear whether you're selling the trip to Alpha Centauri, which, you see, because you make certain references like there are a lot of billionaires and trillionaires these days, they're paying money to go to the moon, right? So I'm not sure whether your product is an engine that takes you to Alpha Centauri and you're selling the trip, or you're selling the engine, and then the trillionaire will buy an engine, put it in his house, just for the sake of it, right? That's where there's a lack of clarity, right? And same thing for the religious groups, assuming you want to take a far-fetched definition that religious leaders want to wage war beyond Earth, right? What are they actually buying? Are they buying the engine, or are they buying the trip to Alpha Centauri, which people say is habitable, right? So I think there's some grayness in what your product actually is and who you're trying to sell it to, and at the end of it, why do people want to buy that? Why would I want to buy the engine? See, it comes down to that. Or is it that I want to buy a trip somewhere, right? Or do nations want to go somewhere as opposed to just buy the engine, right? So it's a little bit actually in terms of where the target market is and what you actually are selling. I said this is a tricky topic, so I should say that first, right? And I think it's got a little bit of the better of you these days. All right, thanks.
may we now invite the next group, Hakim's Secret.
Good morning to everyone present in the hall today. My name is Hakim, and I'm the CEO of Hakim's Secret. Today we'll be discussing on how stomach cheats will monitor you to lose weight. If you don't mind. I will now pass the mic to my CMO, Firoz, to elaborate on the topic.
Did you know that 1 in 5 Malaysians have diabetes? 1 in 3 Malaysians above 30 years old have obesity. And each year, a number of people become blind due to diabetes after diagnosis of obesity. In addition, the death toll for obese patients this year has risen to about 32,000, and for diabetics, it's 3,000 alone this year. And did you know that Malaysia is now the #1 fattest country in Southeast Asia? Next, stomach chips. How it's done is that there are these microchips, and it's connected to cuff electrodes, which are then connected to the vagus nerve, which plays a very important role in controlling your appetite. And it also involves an intelligent, implantable modulator, so that it can, well, I'll explain about that in a bit.
Okay, from the chips, they will send in sort of a signal to the receiver. In return, the receiver will have this transmitted encryption code from the stomach chip, and from that receiver, the receiver will use some sort of a Bluetooth to either your Mac, your iPad, your iTouch, your iPhone, or any sort with a Bluetooth with it. Then it's like, imagine if you're actually having a buffet dinner, just your own dinner with your family, and then all of a sudden there's a beep at your message and says, please reduce protein intake. Yeah, that's sort of a message from your own stomach chip. That will be encrypted to your receiver, and then you'll Bluetooth it to your phone, iPad, sorts.
Alright, how it helps you lose weight is that when these chips are connected to the vagus nerve, actually when you eat, even though you're full, your brain for some reason doesn't administer that. You still feel hungry. And that's why people gain weight fundamentally. So how this chips help is that when it's attached to the nerve, the impulses goes to the microchip. The microchip processes the information. It sends its own electrical impulses to the brain, so that it tells you that you're done, you're full, and you don't need any more food. So yeah.
And potential buyers, our so-called target market, will be patients who have obesity, diabetes, or heart diseases. We are actually targeting this market is because as you eat, we tend to forget that we are who we eat. Okay? Our so-called term. And other than that, we also target people who would like to control their weight. For example, athletes who are boxers or runners, athletes. They are normally have their own weight limit to go to certain competitions or competitions. Then hereditary diseases, we encourage people with hereditary diseases because hereditary diseases can be overcome by your own self, and we encourage people who have these kind of diseases to have it.
if you compare with other weight loss methods like gastric bending, actually gastric bending is when you tie your stomach so that you don't eat too much. But the problem is drinks like Diet Mountain Dew or Coke have high calories. And if you drink it, you'll still get into your stomach and you still gain those calories. But in the partnership you're using, it's very natural. You don't feel hungry, and that's how it helps you. And people won't have any like urge or hunger pangs to eat more than what they can take.
And here are the advantages. It's cheap, reversible. If you are feeling any hungry, it says at hunger pangs, you will not be as you won't feel hungry, unlike gastric bending. And there's no side effects, and it's very effective. When I mean cheap, it means that unlike others, we have combined all the costs together. Therefore, we have the cost of surgery, near or later for the power, and program and receiver from where it's from 2,000 to 4,000 much.
Okay. Okay, one question, because there was a slight contradiction in two parts of the presentation, so I just want to clarify. There was one part where initially, I think you mentioned that it will interface through Bluetooth or something with the mobile device, yeah? And what actually happens then is that a message will be sent to your device that tells you maybe you should stop eating. Is that correct?
Actually, different people have different calorie intake.
Right.
So yeah, so you need this Bluetooth, this app on your phone, your tablet, anything, to just send the information to your membership first, saying that your maximum calorie intake is this much, so that when you eat, then you're full already, and you have that maximum intake. They can deliver the right electrical impulse to your brains.
Okay, so that was the contradiction which was trying to clarify. So what you're saying is, if I understand it now, the interaction with the device is not something where it tells you should stop. It's an input device into the chip, which then automatically goes to the brain. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so it is an automatic. The chip automatically tells your brain not to eat. It's not a message that goes to your device. Okay, so I was trying to clarify that. Okay, second question. What happens? What happens if you input inaccurately or deliberately? Would that then be harmful to you? Because then it causes you, for example, if you take people who are concerned about beauty, right? At the moment, what do? Physically, they starve themselves. That's what we assume, right? In this case, with the device, what would happen if they deliberately input to make themselves always feel full? Wouldn't that be harmful, and how would you counter that? Because they want to maintain their beauty or their body, and because you have an input device that's not built on a natural scientific calculation, it's a manual input. I'm just exploring. What happens if I use this device to say I want to remain thin, so I'm always programming myself to be full, and as a result of which your brain is always saying that you're full, but you're actually not eating at all. You have any comment on that?
Well, I think first you need to surgically implant the thing, so it's really a doctor's prescription kind of thing. So I think it won't.
Okay, boys. When you talk about the target being people who are suffering from obesity, what you have to understand is that these people need exercise, not controlling on their eating. They're suffering from obesity. That would be a very good target for people who are healthy and want, as you said, like athletes. That makes sense. But when you talk about obesity, how would this help people who are overweight and need actual exercise to burn that
well, if you think about it, there are some obese people who are huge, like they can't even stand up properly, and exercise is not really an option for them. So so helping to control their diet actually helps in losing their weight.
But the whole idea that I'm full, I'm not going to eat, that could be on a subconscious level. You know, you can decide on that. You don't need a chip to tell you that. You understand what I mean?
I mean, it's like whenever we have this device, it's a setting where it can be helped by a family member of how much they can eat obesity, because like this, they are just too lazy. Subconsciously, they will be too lazy to move. So obviously, they need a third party to help them. So the setting of the device will be helped by a family or a friend to help them with slimming down instead of putting the input themselves, or else they'll be lying to themselves instead. So that's the setting of it. If a friend or family can help out.
Thank you.
Maybe, I don't think you got the slide, but the funding for this would come from...
We actually have a slide for that, but for some reason we skipped it. It's inside. But perhaps Joshua can explain a bit more.
Like we said before, the funding is actually can be brought in by a family or friends or a bank loan, business partner who tends to, or investors who are interested in this kind of technology, and actually own it yourself. Actually. And like I said before, we have already calculated the cost from surgery all the way down to the program. And like I said, the range of this value is 2,035 to 4,865. That's the cost of having to own one device. And yeah, financially, anybody can actually own this device, from a healthy person to a person who is obese or having a heart disease.
The funding of the production, not buying the product. Where would you get the money to create the device? Not who would buy it?
By investors who are actually very, who might...
What kind of investors? That's the question.
Investors that can be doctors or hospital managers, private ones, government owned, or we can also have bank loans to create this project of our own. Thank you.
Okay, just a quick one. Just a quick one. I think at the end of the day, there's some gray area between the interaction between the device, the input, and the control of the stomach. At the end of the day, the question is whether the stomach chip operates pretty much automatically to each person's body, or it's programmable. That's a big difference. Secondly, I think the funding is very general. When you list up down your funding slide, right, it doesn't really show how you intend to finance your product. So just to share with you, you need to be very much more specific and say, okay, I need this much money to produce this number of units. We're not talking about funding him buying the product. That's the wrong direction. It's about how much money I need to produce this stomach chip device, and who you're going to get the money from, and why would these people invest in you, and stuff like that. So that general slide had so many things there, like family and all that. That's very confusing, because it mixes the financing of the product, the buyer, and the financing of the manufacturing and research of the product, right? So just to let you know. All right, thanks.
Next will be Team Real United by Junior Ones.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're from Rail United Incorporated, and today we'll be presenting you guys with the prediction that an engine will be able to take us to the Alpha Centauri. Now, without further ado, I shall pass the mic to Eliana to explain.
Okay, what is Alpha Centauri? Alpha Centauri is known to be one of the biggest stars in the southern constellation of Centaurus. The two main components are Alpha Centauri A and Alpha Centauri B. Alpha Centauri is the third brightest star from Earth. Okay, these stars are an average of 4.3 light years away. Okay, so what's the plan? Okay, in order to go to Alpha Centauri, we need to build an everlasting ship that can transport a group of people there safely. Okay, researchers propose that a generation ship will be built, a ship that's massive in size and can transport thousands to millions of people. As a result, the ship must be able to sustain itself and the people on it, producing its own fuel, oxygen, food, and water, and other supplies as well. The word generation means that people will live, reproduce, and die on the ship until the generation that finally arrives at Alpha Centauri.
Now, let's ask ourselves a very important question. Why hasn't this prediction been fulfilled yet? Well, most conventional rockets using conventional propellant can only go up to 62,000 kilometers per hour. At that rate, it would take about 165,000 years to get to Alpha Centauri. Unfortunately, a bit too slow. Antimatter engines are imminent, where it uses matter combined with antimatter, and it annihilates when they are both combined together, producing high amounts of energy. However, there is not enough antimatter to fulfill this purpose. Next slide, please. Alright, what we propose to get the Alpha Centauri is a xenon ion engine, also known as a Hall effect thruster. Now, how this works is that it combines negatively charged high-energy electrons with neutral xenon ions. This causes another electron to be produced, causing high amounts of energy, which will be used as a thrust. An advantage of this is that it does not need much space, and therefore there will be less mass in the rocket, making it more fuel efficient. Next slide, please. The blue glow over there basically shows the thrust created by the photons released by the ions. Next slide. And this is basically just another explanation of the xenon ion engine and how it looks like.
So here's the current progress. In June 2013, NASA announced that their xenon ion propulsion engine had been running for 48,000 hours, which is equivalent to 5.5 years. So for over 2,000 days, this engine had been running in their vacuum chamber in their research center in Cleveland, Ohio. And developed under the NASA's NEXT project, which stands for NASA Evolutionary Xenon Thruster, this engine holds the record for the longest test duration of any space propulsion system. So how will it make our lives better? So theoretically, it is said that there's a planet in the Alpha Centauri system that can sustain human life. Astronomers say that there is a planet known as Alpha Centauri b that is similar to the Earth. The only problem is that it may be covered with molten rock. But that is not a problem because the mere existence of this planet basically proves that there are other planets lurking around this system that is in the habitable zone.
Travel to the Alpha Centauri will be greatly beneficial to the human race. This is because in the 200 years to 1,000 years to come, 200 to 1,000 years to come, the state of Earth will be highly unpredictable. This is because of things like global warming, which is being accelerated by human activities, and WMDs, weapons of mass destruction, which are currently under production and being held by nuclear wars could lead the human race to a possible doomsday and to our own demise, and Alpha Centauri could be our only safe race. Research and development into the Alpha Centauri project will have many benefits to physics. The whole Alpha Centauri project is based around physics, and technology for it is based around physics.
research and development into this will help advance physics forward. And not only will technology for this improve, but it will help improve technology in other fields as well that revolve around physics.
So basically the product that we're creating is this Z0 ion engine which enables us to travel to Alpha Centauri in shorter periods of time. Now this product will be interesting because it affords a space tourism opportunity that is unique. As you can see on the slide, intrepid travelers who want a different experience from what they can get on Earth can literally be out of this world. And astrophysicists would want to visit Alpha Centauri as it is made up of two stars, Alpha Centauri A and Alpha Centauri B. As there are both, as it's a binary star system, closer examination of Alpha Centauri should reveal interesting facts about nuclear fission and the way star system works. Next slide, please.
Funding for the Alpha Centauri project will definitely come from government institutions like NASA and other space agencies.
Don't worry, we're asking you on this. Okay, quick clarification. The product, okay, is the travel.
Yes, the Z0 ion engine used for traveling.
Okay, alright, good. Okay, the fact that nobody's got any question is either extremely good or extremely bad. but here's my view. I think let's start with the beginning. One thing I would describe your presentation as is that it's very thorough. Okay? I think we've seen several Alpha Centauri tech presentations, and I think you're the only group so far that's actually mentioned right in the beginning that there's a whole bunch of other factors to consider when you're traveling that far. You know, food, you know, the fact that it's multiple generations, it's just not the engine. It's too simplistic to say, I've got an engine, let's go. What about G-force? What about food? What about survival? And I like that approach, right? It's very thorough. In terms of the explanation of the technology, I think that's crystal clear, so that's well done. What I think is stronger about this presentation, maybe compared to the others, is you've got very good clarity over what your product is. It is space travel, it's not the engine. A lot of people have got into the trap of saying, my product is the engine. It's not the engine. What do I do with the engine, right? It's about the opportunity to travel to that location. And I think you're really spot on in terms of who are the people that you're targeting. I don't see any religious leaders. I don't know why, but maybe you don't consider them important as Asian group. But that's really clear. I think what I'm going to ask you is what you didn't have the chance to present is who's going to fund this and why would they fund it, you know? If based on the fact that that's your target market, based on the fact. So can you just explain?
Funding will definitely come from governmental institutions like, for example, NASA and other space agencies, because many of them have expertise in things like space travel, especially intergalactic space travel. We're going between solar systems, star systems like the Alpha Centauri star system. And in the past, funding from governmental institutions has been a problem because the US government funded NASA in their project to send a probe to Europa, which is one of the moons for Jupiter. And the US government managed to give them $75 million for that project. So I'm pretty confident for a project going into another galaxy, going into another star system. I'm sure the government will definitely fund something.
Okay, actually one more question, but again, before I ask you the last question, it's just a hypothetical question anyway. The other thing that I want to mention is that I like the comfort that each one of you have in presenting what you presented. It's a very tricky topic, as I've said, but I like the fact that you're comfortable and you displayed the comfort, you know, and I think that's really good for you. Here's my really hypothetical question, because you guys seem to be pretty much, into this zone. So let me ask you, do you think Star Wars is a reality? Not as in a movie, but Star Wars, given where you're coming from.
Interstellar travel, Star Wars uses the concept of the warp drive. However, because we didn't mention, warp drives require extremely high amounts of energy. To hold it for 5 minutes requires negative energy the size of Jupiter. So, for traveling to other star systems within a matter of days, probably won't become a reality until we break Einstein's rule of special relativity. But I can see interstellar travel becoming more common in the near future.
Okay, well done.
Thank you. We will now proceed to the next group, Juggernaut from Form 4.
Alright, good morning to everyone. We're Group Juggernaut and we'll be talking about an engine will enable us to go to Alpha Centauri.
Okay, what's Alpha Centauri? Alpha Centauri is the closest star system to our sun. When our sky is dome, we see this multiple star as a single star. It's the third brightest star from our planet Earth. It is about 4.22 light years away from Earth, which is 40 trillion kilometers. Alpha Centauri's temperature is a few degrees lighter than the Sun, but its greater diameter about 25% more bigger than the Sun. And the overall larger surface area is its brightness nearly 1.6 times that of our star.
Aaron White stunned the aeronautics world when he announced that he and his team, NASA, had begun work on the development of a faster than the speed of light, which is a spacecraft that can transport which is a spacecraft that is faster than the speed of light. His proposed design may eventually result in an engine that can transport a spacecraft to the nearest star in a matter of weeks. Harold White speculates that such a drive could result in speeds that could take a spacecraft to Alpha Centauri in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. Even though the system is 4.3 light years away.
What is warp drive? Warp drive was a technology that allowed space travel at faster than lighter speed. It worked by generating warp field to form a subspace bubble that enveloped the starship, distorting the local space-time. Continuum and moving the starship at velocity that could greatly exceed the speed of light.
What would it be like to travel at warp speed? The space warp works on the principle that you can expand and contract space at any speed. Take a terrestrial analogy. In airports, we have moving walkways that help you cover distance quicker than you would otherwise. You are walking along at 3 miles an hour, then you will step onto the walkway. You are still walking at 3 miles an hour, but you are covering the distance much more quickly, relatively to somebody who isn't on the belt. Thank you.
Okay, magic question, what's your product?
What?
Magic question, what is your product? What's the product? What are you selling? What are you going to sell?
We just support the NASA.
Sorry?
We're just supporting the research of NASA and helping them to spread out the message that they'll be making a spaceship going to the closest star.
Okay, but that's NASA's research. You need to have a product. And I think that's the challenge that you have to figure out. What's your product? If you're supporting the research that NASA has, then we don't need your company, right? Okay, so I think that's why you don't have a target market, probably, right? Yeah, but that's something that's a big thing that's missing, right?
Just one question, why Juggernaut? Why Juggernaut?
Juggernaut.
It's just a name that came to our heads.
Do you know what it means?
Because from games we've been playing, I guess.
Do you know which character is Juggernaut?
What was the question?
Yeah, which game, which character?
Call of Duty.
Okay, so you got it from Call of Duty?
Yep.
Life is not a video game, you know that, right? Thank you.
Okay, I think I just have two overall comments. My first comment is I don't think that you're very comfortable with the subject matter because, again, on the presentation, I've always said this, you need to be very conscious that you are talking to people and not reading or worse, talking to the paper or your iPhone, all right? That's very clear from our point of view. So even though you may not realize that people are noticing, people do notice. And the moment you have a presentation where you are substantially reading off something, people know that you're not comfortable with the subject. It shows. Right? That's something that I want to share with you. If I were to ask you to talk about your favorite video game, Call of Duty, for example, you wouldn't need to refer to anything. You know, yeah, so you know what I'm talking about, right? So you need to get to a stage where you must take a project or an assignment and be able to deliver it with understanding, like Call of Duty or your favorite game. The moment you start reading, it shows. I'm not saying that you can't refer, you can refer, right? With points, but you need to be talking to people, right? That's my first comment. Second comment is that there's a big part here which I think you're missing, which is that you must have a product, not just support the research of someone. Right? You need to figure out a product which I think you haven't figured out. And obviously, because you haven't figured out the product, you have no target market and you have no funding. And then the whole thing becomes, it's not there. So I don't think this was good as you can do. This was not at all at a level where I would expect you to be. So you need to know that. You need to know that, and the next time you do something, you need to do much better than this. All right? Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Next, we will have Team Derick Zikry from Form 5.
My name is Derick, and the topic we choose for this presentation is submarine will be obsolete as underwater travel will be visually undetectable. The basic idea we have is that to build that is visually undetectable on land and also underwater world, unlike a modern submarine that is visually undetectable on land but not underwater and also can move underwater freely.
Now, the first thing that popped in my mind is how is this going to work? After some research, I've discovered a several way to achieve this goal. I think you have watched the movie
to Russell Crowe the screen. If you look at the screen, the lady turned invisible after wearing that suit. So basically our concept is that the front part of the screen we will use a high definition LED screen, and at the back we will be using 3D camera that will capture and project images on the front part of the screen. So basically we're using this concept structure that we're building. And the shape of the house that we are planning to build is in a semicircular shape, like as you can see on the screen. This will reduce the frictional force acting on the house and therefore reducing the unexpected moment of the house.
Now we have covered the visually undetectable part and the unexpected movement part of the project, and left us with a part where the house can be go underwater traveling, whereby we add 3 approximately 500 horsepower motor to the house, 2 to the back side and 1 at the back of the platform.
Okay, with this technology, we believe that people can be able to have more privacy, reduce danger causes under the sea. And the countries also can use this technology to protect themselves from unexpectable events or natural disasters.
Our target market is marine biologists, for them to study new undiscovered marine species. Ways to raise funds and collect money are by government tax, exhibition to raise funds for their building, and also researching of the house that we think that creates a better future for the human race. And with that, we end our presentation.
Okay, first question. I think the judges will have some more questions. Just explain what's the relevance of the house example that you're giving to the submarine.
Sorry, I didn't.
Okay, if you go back to your topic is about submarines being obsolete, right? But you gave an example of a house, and I just trying to connect the example that you gave to the house to the topic that you're presenting. Can you?
The topic is about underwater traveling, which is virtually
undetectable. All right. Okay.
If you could maybe just build a model of a house that is usually undetectable, so even not in deep water, even in shallow water, it's invisible.
Okay, so you have explain your house example in very summarized form, just in very short words. Explain your house example. What were you trying to show us?
Basically, the house is a visually undetectable moving house underwater. It's visually undetectable because you cannot see the surface of the house. It's basically the front part of the house is the back part of the house. The camera is at the back, capturing the image of the back and then projecting it in front of the house.
Okay.
So it's basically invisible, or we say camouflage.
So you're able to camouflage the house above water, not underwater, above water.
Above and also underwater.
Okay, I'm trying to process that. Let me pass it first. My brain is processing.
I think we need some clarification, like how you're relating the house and also the submarine. Until now, we couldn't get the overall picture of your project. So maybe could you simply relate it first? Why house and how it's related with the submarine? If we can go beyond that, then we can ask you more questions. But now we cannot pass through that yet.
Our project is more to the traveling part of traveling and then vacation also. We figured.
So the submarine is the shape of a house, is it? What you're trying to say? Or the concept? What shape is your submarine going to be? Is it a house?
Now the topic is said submarine is obsoleted. That means there's no more submarine produced. So we figured there's no need for submarine underwater to be invisible. So
okay, you got a lot of blanks here because I think we're not quite clear how you connect your house example to the fact that you're moving underwater undetected. Can you flash the main slide of the group? The starting slide. You still have the computer? You don't have it anymore, right? Okay. No, that's fine. I think that's the general confusion. We don't see the connection between the topic. Yes, the topic is in two statements. Yeah, obsolete submarines are obsolete, so no more submarines. Right? But the whole idea is because we can travel underwater undetected. All right, and we're having difficulty understanding how you can travel underwater undetected with your house example. Are you saying that it's because of the way that you're using the TV screens to make it camouflage or invisible, and then you put it underwater and then your house, whatever device can move underwater and is undetected. So basically it's not as clear as we would like it to be. But one thing that I commend you is that you took the trouble to have a lot of people actually involved in your presentation, which I think is good because a few groups just have one or two people speaking. I think at least you took a real effort to have everybody involved. So well done for that. All right, thanks.
We will now invite the next group, Climax Inc. from Junior 1.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are Climax Incorporated, and today we have very important questions for you.
Are you sick of pollution? Are you sick of global warming? Don't you want more trees in the world? Thank you. So today we will be presenting a solution that could lead to that. So the discovery that we are presenting today will be that how we humans, how can we grow homes? Yes, not build homes, but grow them. Thank you.
As you can see on the screen, Mitchell Joachim is one of the major researchers who are pursuing this discovery, and he is acknowledged as an innovator in ecological design, architecture, and urban design.
Next slide, please. Alright, so as we all know, a home is made up of different components. It's not just the outer structure, nor is it just the interior. So whenever we want to even grow homes, there are different components that we have to go through. So what I will be stating now is how we would be able to use the concept of pleaching to grow out the outer structure of our homes. Okay, so pleaching is basically the intertwining and interlacing of tree branches. So pleaching is actually not a new concept that has been brought into the world. It's been here since way back in the 17th century. However, they just had not thought of using this concept to grow homes. They had merely used it for the concept of gardening. So how this would work is there is a computer called the CNC, the Computer Numeric Control, which basically is a machine that helps convert designs made by a CAD, a computer-aided design, into numbers which are coordinates of a graph. So with this, the machine, the CNC, it will help to control the movement of the cutter so that we can make specific geometrical shapes with it.
And now I will tell you guys about how we are going to use tree roots to make the foundations and the pillars for the house. Researchers have actually found a species of trees where the roots grow aerophonically, which means it goes upwards, not into the ground or the soil. And so these roots can be grown in labs, and once they are long enough and malleable enough, they can be turned and twisted around metal bars so that they can take shapes of bench or playground so that these can be used. And by using this, you will save energy and money.
So, how exactly will this method benefit people?
So, having a house made of green plants aids life resources that are currently being used to build houses.
Also, plants take in carbon dioxide, so in a way, we are increasing the plants in the world, and more oxygen will be released instead of carbon dioxide. Also, there will be no more pollution from construction sites.
Construction sites generate high levels of dust and can cause health problems like asthma. There will also be noise pollution, which can cause hearing loss and sleep disturbance.
Okay, so why else would people want these houses? Well, when people buy things like clothes, they want the feel-good factor. By buying these houses, they are, in a way, helping to save the earth. Also, there are Victorian-style houses, Gothic-style houses, etc. So why not this? This could be the new thing, the house of our era.
Since we need to put together many structures to fully construct a house, I'll be explaining how we can use grow pillars naturally. By using mycelium, which are mushroom roots, they can bond together with agricultural byproducts such as corn stalk to act as an alternative to plastic foam and styrofoam.
With this material, it will grow into wood which forms over a number of days, forming an airtight seal before drying over the following month, leaving an extremely strong, eco-friendly airtight wall. With this material, since mycelium is made from mushroom, it is biodegradable, and we can use this to replace styrofoam and plastic insulation. Mycelium is also fire resistant, water resistant, and eco-friendly. Using mycelium also saves costs, and our environment as producing plastic, such as styrofoam, requires 1.5 liters of petrol worth of energy to produce 1 cubic foot of styrofoam.
Okay, so you can see there are three pictures. The right one is the furniture, so the other are the structures of the house. They actually look cool and stylish.
Okay, for our target market, our product first introduced to the market, our primary buyer will be most likely environmentalists, as our product is to save the environment. However, sooner or later, our more and more citizens will be buying our product as long as our product is not that expensive.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay. Question is, what's your product? Describe your product.
The house made of trees.
Okay, so you would be selling a completed house made this way. Is that your product?
Yes.
Okay, so you're not selling some machine that people go and do their own houses and all that. So you are building, you're housing developers. Okay?
Alright, as you know, the house needs to have resistance. Okay, now how would you ensure the resistance of the house knowing that it is made of tree, wood, log, timber?
what?
Against fire, against
The
earthquake,
mycelium,
against...
the fungus that we are using as insulation is flame retardant.
That means it doesn't burn.
It's fire resistant.
It's fire resistant, so it doesn't burn.
Yes.
Okay. And then how does it grow?
Grows upward. I beg your pardon, what do you mean? How does it grow up?
No, I want to know, it has roots in the ground, right?
Fungus?
No. These...
Oh, the tree, yes, it
Yeah.
does.
Okay, and those roots, how do you preserve their resistance against, let's say, earthquakes? Because when you talk about a big project, people don't not just want something exotic. You're trying to revolutionize, right, the way we make houses. Is that right? Okay. So you're thinking of huge projects. Okay. Now, when we build houses, we're not thinking just of beauty and space. We're also thinking of resistance, a place that is strong enough. Let's say if there's an earthquake. Have you done research on that?
Our target market is not anywhere near the Ring of Fire or anything. It's our primary target market is Malaysia.
It's only Malaysia.
Yes, we want to start small, then expand.
And then for expanding, do you have any plans to know whether this is
Not
resistant?
yet. We don't want to plan too far ahead.
Thank you, Tristan.
You're welcome.
So not talking about earthquakes, but what about smaller problems like insects and pests? Would that be a problem? Have you thought about that?
Even with our houses nowadays, we have that problem. So,
Potentially it could be increased because they seem to be attracted to these sorts of things.
sorry, could you please clarify?
If it's like it's like a mini jungle, like an outside environment, and it would attract more insects and pests potentially than apartment buildings, house buildings.
I really don't understand your question.
If you go outside and you see a tree,
Yeah.
there will probably be ants, insects around, right?
That problem can be easily remedied with paint. Our paint would repel insects and whatnot. Thank you.
Just now you mentioned about mycelium, right? Mycelium is some sort of how you apply to your house.
To form the walls, the
Form the
pillars
walls,
of the
so-
house.
So it means that the
To make sure that it's airtight.
or
Yeah.
something like cement, is
Yeah,
it?
but more natural.
Okay, just one more question, and then I'm just going to give you my overall comment. How would this house handle electricity, the toilet system? At a minimum, how would the house handle both of this?
It's like a normal wooden house, except that it's a room. Yeah.
So structurally inside is you would have to then put in your electrical fittings, your urinary systems, everything. Okay, here's my overall comment. I think first of all, once again, I applaud you for having so many people involved. I think even though some of them take a small part, but I think it shows your commitment here to have people involved. I think that's a good thing. Technologically, this is a very interesting project. I think there are a lot of things that need to be thought about, which I don't know, and maybe we're not in the scope to explore. Like for example, if you're going to do this on a very small scale, then I can see quite easily happening. But when you're doing it on a mass construction basis, it becomes a different proposition, right? Do you have enough trees? How long do the trees grow? How are you going to grow the trees? But just out of curiosity, is your product meant to be like a very specialized, customized thing, or is it a mass thing that you're looking at in the future? Just a question of curiosity. Do you see this as a housing project, for example?
Yes, it's basically a housing project.
Okay, so you do see it as a housing project, yeah? And I think when you get to that level where you're going to build a whole area, then there are quite a lot more technical considerations that you need to mention. Because I can see this easily happening if I'm just going to build one house outside, and just split a tree. But a housing project becomes a little bit more challenging, and I think you need to cover the ground, right? My only comment really is that I think you're quite comfortable in what you have presented. Some of you would do better with less reading, right, and more comfort level. But I do have one very clear observation. What's the name? Josephine, is it? Josephine, you've taken the responsibility to answer most of it. Josephine, is that the right person that I'm pointing to? Yeah, all right. You've taken the responsibility to answer most of the questions, I think, right? I do want to share with you that the manner in which you answer questions is very defensive. And I think you should be aware of that. It's not a negative comment, but it's something that you should be aware of. And I think sometimes it's frustrating when people ask you questions, they get a very stand-off answer, which some people in some cultures would deem rude. So it's like, yeah, but house also got termites. I mean, that's not an answer. It's not a professional answer. You must bear in mind that we are playing a role, and we must therefore play it to the full extent. If you have a question coming from an investor like that, that can appear to be a very good answer. And I think sometimes you should be aware as presenters, you never need to appear that you know all the answers, because we know if you don't. So sometimes it's okay to say, no, I really haven't thought about that, that's a good point, let me consider that, and instead of always saying, yeah, it's like that, but it's like that, that's how it's done, So if you know what I'm getting at, I think it's good that you're taking the responsibility to answer questions, but this is my feedback to you. You should be aware of that. All right? Okay, but otherwise I thought it was quite well done. All right, good. Thanks.
Next, we have Isotopes from Hong Kong.
Known via Isotopes from 4 to 6. Now pass my neck.
The implant is a tiny biodegradable tube that is placed around the two cut ends of the nerve and holds them together end to end. Its inner surface is covered with a restorative gel. The restorative gel is also known as guiding regeneration gel. The guiding regeneration gel is a substance that supports the growth of new nerve through three substances, which is antioxidants, synthetic laminin peptides, and also hyaluronic acid.
How will it help people and make the world a better place? It recovers the unresponsive parts of our bodies, including the sensation of pain, cold, and touch. It also cures irritability due to paralysis.
Other than that, we also recover walking and moving ability, which leads to better physical fitness. It can also reduce the need for medicine intake and improve mood can lead to increased productivity.
Who will likely be buying this discovery? People with agoraphobia. there is an impairment in motor or sensory function of the lower extremities. It is usually the result of spinal cord injury or a congenital condition such as spina bifida, which affects the neural elements of the neural. So basically, it is a complete paralysis of the legs and lower body.
For fundraising, we can look for companies such as Sigma Medical Juggernaut to invest our product, which is guiding regeneration gel. We chose Sigma Medical Juggernaut as our investor, as they have allocated 7.7 million ringgit for healthcare product.
Besides that, we can also ask government for help to raise funds through traffic fines. This funding method happened in Alabama, proposed by T.J. Atchison from University of South Alabama. Thank you.
Okay, some quick questions. I'm fascinated by the last funding that you had, which is raising funds through traffic fines, right? I know you cited the research on that, right? Is there a specific reason why they use this funding in the research that you do? Is it related to spinal cord, or it's just a way to raise money? I've got a hot microphone. Nobody wants it. Anyone? I'm just curious.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, you said that one of the ways you're going to raise funds, or you're thinking of raising funds, is from the government, from its traffic fines, right? That means you fine people for traffic offences, which is what I assume, right? And then you stated that someone in Alabama was using this method to raise money, right? I just want to know whether the raising money through traffic fines, in the example that we gave in Alabama, is related to spinal cord research, or it's not, it's just a way to raise money to fund a project. Can you just share with me?
It is related to the spinal.
It is related? What did they do?
It's like,
They are related, as some of the spinal cord injuries are caused by car accidents due to the herpes virus.
Okay, right, that makes more sense. Okay. Yeah, just one more question. In the end, you've got this research done, right? What is the product you're going to sell? What is it you're selling?
guiding regeneration gel.
Okay, so that's your product, all right? And okay, you've listed your target market, all right? That's fine. Okay, just an overall, again, I think it's good that all of you got involved. I think that's the last point. I like your funding for two reasons. Number one, I think you were very specific in identifying one organization that actually funds this sort of projects. I think that's very important. Funding is not just about going out and shouting that you need money. You know, you need to be very relevant to find organizations that actually support what you're trying to do, and I think that was good. I'm happy that your Alabama traffic project, the way that they are funding through traffic fines is related in a way because of accidents that are caused by these traffic accidents that go back into saving people, from spinal cord injuries. I think maybe the only thing that I maybe would, and I'm not sure, is your comfort with the technical aspect of what you're presenting. Is it language? If I want to ask you a question, would you be more comfortable if you spoke in Chinese or something? Seriously? Yes? Okay. Because I think what I do want to say, and it's for everybody as well is that I've always emphasized in Connect that it is your comfort with the subject matter and understanding that is important. I would not actually penalize people because they're not comfortable with a certain language. At the end of the day, you choose whatever language you're comfortable in. If all you desire is to be comfortable in the Chinese language, then this will be, at some stage, maybe that's where your career is going to be. Go to China, go to the Chinese-speaking language, do your presentation. So that's why I asked you the question. I suspect technically you know what you're talking about, but there's this struggle with the language altogether. Yeah? So don't worry about that. Maybe in an English language competition, you might not get the highest marks, but what's important is that you must know yourself deep inside whether you understand what you're doing, and if you could present it in a language of your choice, then that's what's important. Some people can speak very comfortably in a language, but they don't understand what's happening. That's not any use. Maybe we should have a Chinese language presentation instead, but I don't understand Chinese, so I won't understand what you're talking about. Okay, thanks.